Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is StepsBasic, and welcome back to my community show. Anyway, so today I came up with this idea while I was playing Prototype. You may have seen it.
What is that? That's green.
Whew. Yeah, you don't say. Yeah, shut up. Wow. Nope, didn't think so. Yes, that battle was frustrating, and it kicked my butt. And that one took its rightful place on this list. It's not the highest on the list of my 5 most hated boss fights. Now, I should go ahead and start this by describing what I consider a bad boss fight. Now, first of all, none of the Bloodborne, none of the Demon Soul, Dark Souls, none of those games count. Because that game is purposely hard to the point where all the boss fights could easily take up this list. And that also extends to the Mega Man series, or at the very least, the first Mega Man series. Whereas those boss fights, if you did them in the right order, none of them were particularly hard, you just had to do it right. And the same goes for things like that. So mechanics kind of disqualify boss fights for this list. And if I say hated boss fights, I don't mean like the boss fight was difficult but manageable. I mean like it was broken. Like the boss fight, like you were doing the game just fine up until you got to that boss fight. Other people can call this a difficulty spike, if you will, but to me it's just the boss fight in particular. Because there are some games where you'll play normally and then the difficulty will ramp up and you're like, what the heck just happened? And it'll be like that for the rest of the game. But this one's like the game's just fine and then all of a sudden boss fight and then it goes back to regular. Now, in some cases that doesn't hold true. Like in my number 1 most hated boss fight ever, we're going way back. Talking NES era. My number 1 most hated boss fight is and probably always will be Chaos from Final Fantasy 1, the original Chaos. Because in that game was tough, don't get me wrong. If you don't do the proper level up, and when I first played it, it was like I didn't really know what I was in for. But if you weren't prepared for it, that game was going to kick your butt all the way through. But if you were properly geared, properly equipped, properly leveled up, got yourself the Excalibur sword, and fought through all the fiends, got to the final area, and then finally beat Tiamat on the Wind Temple, and then jumped down and went and did the whole Chaos went through the whole Chaos Shrine stuff, and went to go fight the final boss, you could still get your butt kicked. Because it's like, first, you start out easy, you got Garland, you got the pirates in Provoca. Astos was a pain in the butt, but he was still manageable. Then you got the ramp up when you start fighting the fiends. Like, the vampire was easy. And then the earth fiend. And that's what the game did to you a lot. But, funny enough, you could fight the fire fiend and the water fiend alternately. You could be like, I don't want to fight the fire fiend first, I want to fight the water fiend. You could do that. And it was easy as long as you did things properly. And I might do that in my playthrough, I don't know yet. But then you get to the final dungeon. In that dungeon, not only will you encounter the fiends, the 4 fiends, over again. Like, there was no save points back then. You couldn't use tents to heal up. You got to the final boss fight with as much life as you had, making it through the whole dungeon. And that in and of itself set the precedent for what you were about to face. Because Chaos was not easy at all. Chaos made every other enemy in the game look like an imp, basically, which was, if you remember, the goblins now in the new form that I'm playing, but they were the base level bad guy, the very beginning bad guy. And that is what Chaos made them all look like. In the very end of the game, when you get to him, I have, admittedly, never defeated him. I'm hoping to change that now when I get through this, when I get through my playthrough of this. I'm hoping that I can actually change that. But he was just ridiculously hard. And Final Fantasy in and of itself is known for having tough final bosses. Funny enough, like for the longest time, when it came to Final Fantasy, I'd stagger it. Like, I didn't beat 1, but I beat 2. I didn't beat 3. Well, I've never played 3. But, you know, so on and so forth. I didn't beat 5, but I beat 6. Although then I beat 7, but then I didn't beat 8, and then I beat 9. And that's when I broke the chain and started beating them all in a row. Then I went back and I beat a bunch of the other bosses. But anyway, that's why Chaos ranks number 1 on my list of the most hated boss fight ever. Now, it's easy to go ahead and say any game from the NES era could easily make this list. Any game with boss fights in them. And as such, there were a lot. I can make a list of just the tough NES bosses. But, you know, I figure I'm going to move away from the NES stuff because, like I said, any number of those bosses can go. But my next least favorite is not because it was hard, but because it was something you had to actually... if you didn't know it was there, you would miss it. And it was the actual ending for Symphony of the Night. I've beat that game several times and didn't realize, I should say I had beat that game several times and didn't realize that I hadn't beat that game. Because the final boss isn't the final boss. You have to find the final boss. You have to go into the upside down castle and everything and battle your way through it again, and I hated the final boss of that one. Because of the fact that I didn't know I hadn't beat the game yet, Dracula. Because in the regular game, if you play through it, you have to fight Richter, and that's different.
Okay, so I described this badly. So the boss fight, the problem I had with it was that if you go through the regular game, you end up fighting Richter Belmont in Dracula's throne room. And, I mean, it seems like all, like, the trappings of a regular final boss fight. You jump in, and it's like, oh my god, evil guy, crazy dude, ruling the castle. You fight him, you beat him, end of the game, right? No. See, the problem was that he was being controlled by Shade? I don't remember what his name was. But you couldn't tell that he was being controlled by him until you found a special pair of glasses, wore the glasses to the boss fight. Then you could see a little orb floating above and behind Richter the whole boss fight. Let's see, if you look at this here, you have you, Richter, then the orb. You had to destroy that orb in order to free Richter from the control of Shade. And then after you free him, then the upside down castle is revealed, and then you have to go up into the upside down castle and basically play through the entire game again, but reverse, backwards, upside down and everything. And then you end up having to fight Lord Dracula at the very end of the game. But of course you also have to unlock him by finding all the pieces of him. But anyway, that's why I didn't like that boss fight. A little bit more convoluted than it should have been.
I'd say I'd probably fit Prototype's boss fight of Elizabeth Green in there. Because, I mean, my playthrough probably excluded, for the most part, the game is pretty easy. You're playing as, you know, Alec Mercer, and you're just playing through and fighting things and, you know, having a grand old time with it. Because that game is basically just about, you know, killing the bad guys. And occasionally the good guys. But it's basically what that game is about. Just get in, have all these powers, be awesome, have fun, and beat it. And then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Elizabeth Green boss fight. Now this game, this battle, first you have to lead up with the escorting the tank, or escorting the tanker, to the to Times Square. Pain in the butt as it is. Then, protecting the thing as it pumps the toxin underground. And then you get to fight the final boss there. Well, then you get to fight Elizabeth Green there. And after all of that, you still have to rely on not only the life you had, you have to rely on your skill with the character. Now, admittedly, I've taken a lot of breaks in that game, and that's probably part of the reason why things are not as easy for me as they should be, because I'm not as fine-tuned with the character as I could be. But all that being said, that boss fight still seems like it was way too ridiculously hard. Now, admittedly, when I first played it, I was tired, a little frustrated after having to guard that thing over and over again. But I mean, seriously, come on. You have to admit that was a bit too hard. Now, in the same vein of ridiculous type of boss fights, I know that there was an easy way to do this. And I did do it after trying my best to do it the right way. But, like with every other boss fight in this game, Metal Gear Solid presented a lot of straightforward boss fights. You had Vulcan Raven, you had to chuck the grenades in there, blow up the tank, easy day. And, like Revolver Ocelot, chase him around, wait till he turns around, shoot him, easy day. Psycho Mantis was a bit tricky, admittedly, when you don't know what you're doing and the whole switching controller ports thing. That was interesting. I loved that. And it was frustrating at first before I knew I could do that. But then, when I did, easy boss fight. The one boss fight I didn't like in it was the Sniper Wolf boss fight. Now, admittedly, like I said, I know there was an easy button to do it with. And if you did it right, you just use your Nikita rocket launcher and guide your way through the snow and blow her up. I did that. But I tried to sniper first, because I figure every other boss fight up until then was exactly what you were presented with. Vulcan Raven, you got explosives, throw explosives. Use a chaff to blind him, grenade, easy day. Revolver Ocelot, he shoots you, you shoot him, same thing. One thing I did forget, I didn't like the ninja battle. But that one doesn't rank as high as the Sniper Wolf battle, because every other instance was like, hey, this is what you got to do. And then you're presented with a sniper, so what do you think? Sniper. Snipe her. Sniping her was not easy. I mean, for one thing, you couldn't see her. You try to snipe her, you bring out your PSG-1, you go across the field, you're looking like, I don't know where she is, and then all of a sudden, because that's what she does. She's better at that. And that just made it a troublesome one. And then at the very end, they make you feel bad for it. Now, I'm all okay, fine, I gotta fight these boss fights, and they are, real people in this game. Vulcan Raven, I love my people, these are the signs of my people, and Revolver Ocelot, I love the smell of cordite in the morning, blah, blah, blah. And all those other fun boss fights. Then you get to Sniper Wolf, you kill her, and then Ocelot comes out and starts crying, and the wolves are howling, and you're like, come on, man. She shot Meryl. She shot me. And they're just making me feel bad for no reason. I mean, she's the bad guy. But then you sit there, then the real truth about the games of Metal Gear Solid really set in. You're like, it's not about who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, because it's war, and that's what war is. But then you're like, I just wanted to play a game. Thanks for making me feel bad. Games are like that. And in part, while that does make it rank high on my list, not only for mechanics, but also for the unnecessary emotional trauma at the end, it also does kind of rank it high up there in good storytelling. Now, along the lines of boss fights that were more emotional than actual difficulty, we have Infamous 2 for the PS3. Infamous 2 was a great game. And if you play through it on the good mode, spoilers, you end up sacrificing yourself to save the world. Beautiful storytelling, amazing. If you play through on the evil mode, you get the final boss fight. Now, I call it a boss fight, but it's not really a boss fight. You're essentially God punishing the wicked, as it were. I can't play through Infamous as an evil character, because then I just feel horrible throughout the entire thing. But yeah, I mean, essentially, that's what that battle was. I mean, they call it a boss fight, but it's more of a struggle with your own conscience, you know, as you're just storming through the city, just wiping out civilians left and right. That's the top 5 of my least favorite boss fights. Now, I'm sure there are more out there. Those are just the ones that came to my head as soon as I thought about it, to be perfectly honest. I was like sitting there thinking about what are my least favorite boss fights, and first one that came up was obviously Chaos. Chaos will always be my least favorite boss fight. And then the Dracula fight in Symphony of the Night, mostly because if it's going to be a final boss fight, I shouldn't have to go and find it. And then, of course, you know, Elizabeth Green from Prototype, Sniper Wolf for the unnecessary emotional gut punch, and then, of course, you know, like I said, the infamous Second Son boss, or not, the infamous 2 boss fight. Sorry, not infamous Second Son. The infamous 2 boss fight, which was essentially just raining destruction on the city. Because, oh, yay, you're evil. Go be evil now. Now, of course, there was a boss fight afterwards. You had to fight, what was her name? But, yeah, essentially that's how that game was, too. But I'm sure there are other boss fights. I just can't think of them right now. And maybe I'll make a revised list. And I'll go back through all my games and start thinking about boss fights that are unfair or just evil. But anyway, if you have any of your own ideas for bad boss fights, be sure to leave those down in the description or the comments down below. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me for tonight's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And like I said, if you have any other ideas for boss fights or any other ideas for just topics for these videos, go ahead and comment those down below, and I will address them as soon as I can, when I can, if I can, you know, all that jazz. And tune in next time for more talky videos. And until then, good night.